The best of money matters. Right Business.
Welcome to The Right Business, where we dive deep into the stories of trailblazers who dare to disrupt the status quo, find the gap in the market to find the right business. Hello, I'm Hongbin Jeong. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by the sheer number of tools and platforms we juggle every day just to get simple work done, you're not alone. As Singapore businesses face growing tech complexity, a research by Notion, an all-in-one workplace platform, shows that office workers lose 66 minutes a day to inefficient work, costing up to 85 billion Sing dollars annually, or 12.5% of GDP. Now, that staggering number is at the heart of Notion's mission to bring clarity back to the digital workplace by offering one powerful, infinitely flexible workspace. The Peak's editor-in-chief recently sat down with Notion's general manager for ANZ, Southeast Asia, and India to unpack more than just the company's product story. What emerged was a conversation about philosophy, software, and the quiet human cost of digital chaos. So joining us today to share more is Zat Astha, who's the editor-in-chief of The Peak Singapore. Hi, Zat. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Well, Zat, you've recently talked to Andrew McCarthy about his role and experience in building Notion. And your article opens with a striking observation that McCarthy speaks with the calm clarity of someone who've, spent years wrestling chaos into order. What was it like to engage with someone like that? And how did that demeanor, shape the kind of story you wanted to tell about Notion?
Well, that opening was quite deliberate because, after all, the whole point of the story was to talk about Notion, which is a software that organizes chaos into bite-sized information that is easy to organize. So that said, right, what struck me most about Andrew was his moral clarity around the problem that Notion is trying to solve. So the surprising thing is that Andrew doesn't speak like a typical tech exec pushing features. There's just this steady conviction in him, right, that modern work has become genuinely broken. So when he talks about, people spending 66 minutes a day just searching for information, it makes me feel like that is perhaps true because that has happened to me too. So when he says those kind of things, you can hear the frustration in his voice. So that sort of shaped my approach to the story, and I wanted to capture not just what Notion does, but why it matters on a more human level.
Right. And if you think about it, 66 minutes is a long time, and that's, spent wasted on inefficiency. But what else stood out to you most about his perspective on building Notion from the inside?
So Andrew has this view that Notion's real innovation isn't technological, but rather it's philosophical. So he described their approach as having the ambition to change the world of software, but the humility to know that it's not our place to dictate how everyone should use it. So that tension between ambition and humility runs through everything that they do. Most software companies build solutions and expect users to adapt. But Notion built building blocks and let users create their own solution. So the other thing that really struck me, right, was his insight about the company's origin story. So initially, the founders they tried to build a no-code software platform, but it didn't work out because people didn't know what to build. So they returned to Kyoto and completely reimagined the whole project. And that's when they realized that they needed to start with something as fundamental as a pen and paper. So something as intuitive as a blank page, and then hide all the complexity behind that simplicity. That, for me, is a very counterintuitive approach to tech, where companies usually tend to lead with their most sophisticated features. And if you've used Notion, as I do, you will realize that this is actually very true. It actually really just starts with a blank page.
Oh, very interesting. Notion has been described in many ways as a note-taking app, a productivity dashboard, a wiki, even an operating system for teams. So, Zat, how would you personally define what Notion is at its core, since you said that you use it as well? What problem does it aim to solve?
Notion, right, is fundamentally about returning agency to users. Yes, there are note-taking. Yes, there is table creation. There's calendar integration. But it's more than that, right? It is actually a platform that says, you know what? Here are the building blocks. Now go and build what actually works for you. So the core problem it solves, right? This is tyranny of rigid software that forces you to work the way the developer imagine rather than the way you actually think. So the other thing that is much, much deeper here that Andrew articulated really, really well is that he said that inside any organization, the greatest asset, right, is the collective intelligence of employees. But most of the time, that intelligence is fragmented and siloed across different tools. So companies can't achieve clarity. So like we're talking of like clarity of speed, clarity of decisions, of executions, because they are constantly searching through these fragments. Notion is trying to reunify that collective intelligence into one coherent workspace.
So do you believe those are universal challenges, or are they more acute in a region like Southeast Asia where work culture and digital adoption patterns might differ?
I think it's absolutely universal. The fragmentation problem is absolutely universal. But Andrew made an interesting point about how it manifests differently across Asia Pacific. So in Singapore, you have this hyper-efficient business culture colliding with digital tools sprawl. So the 60 minutes, right, that we mentioned earlier that is spent searching for information isn't just inefficiency. Like it is actually a culture that values, isn't just inefficiency, especially in a culture that values precision and speed. It's actually genuinely quite a painful problem.
Okay, so in a landscape, saturated with productivity tools, how does Notion then stand out? I mean, what differentiates Notion from legacy tools like, Google Docs?
Okay, so I love Google Docs as much as anyone else. I really do. And I know so many people who do as well. Like we live and breathe Google Docs.
Right.
And it took us quite a while to get here. But legacy tools like Google Docs, right, they solve one problem really well, which is document organization, or like Google Docs. Essentially, it's just document organization. But what Notion solves, right, is the meta problem, the fact that work doesn't fit neatly into predefined categories. So Andrew told me about a customer who planned their wedding and built an enterprise project management system on the same platform. So that, for me, is the differentiator. The software adapts to human complexity rather than forcing simplification. But what's also quite fascinating is how this creates these very interesting subcultures around the platform. So Notion, if you ask anybody who uses Notion, right, there is this fascination and this almost dedication to notioning your life, right, that most people do express if they use Notion. And I have slowly become one of those. And Andrew tells me about YouTube channels dedicated to advanced workflows, online marketplaces for templates, right, user meetups that feel more like creative salons. And that's not happening with Google Docs or Microsoft Word. Right, we love our Google Docs, but there's not going to be a Google Doc meetup.
Right.
When your tool becomes a medium for creativity and for self-expression, and not just productivity, you've in some ways transcended the traditional software category entirely.
Okay, so one of the big questions with any tech product out there, though, is why is now the right time? So from your interview with Andrew, did you get a sense of why Notion's model works in today's market?
Okay, so Andrew pointed to two converging factors. So the thing is that we have hit peak software sprawl, right? He cites me the fact that companies went from 8 apps in 2015 to over 100 in the 2020s. And AI itself has made complex creation simple. So you can now type, create me a customer tracker, and Notion builds it behind the scenes. So the timing is perfect because people are drowning in tool just as AI makes consolidation really, really and actually possible.
It looks like Andrew also talks about fragmented knowledge and how modern workers spend more than an hour each day searching for information across tools. So from your interview then, Zat, what do you think this says about the real cost of digital abundance, not just in lost time, but in the mental toll it takes on people?
The cost even just like the last 66 minutes, right? It is showing up to dinner with your family already drained from fighting with software all day. So that's a profound human cost we rarely discuss. But there's also something almost philosophical in how Andrew frames this for me. He said he doesn't believe humans were designed to sit and move data from one spreadsheet to another, or to spend their days searching for information across fragmented systems. So there's this implicit argument that much of what we call work today isn't actually meaningful work. It's just friction created by bad tools. And that friction doesn't stay at the office. It follows you home. It affects your relationships. It shapes your mood. So when he talks about wanting the future to become a little bit more human, he's really talking about reclaiming human dignity from software that treats people like data processors.
I mean, you've covered many tech companies and founders. Zat, based on this interview with Andrew, what do you personally think makes Notion's story unique?
Most tech companies I write about, they scale by adding features. Notion scaled by subtracting complexity. So they took the most fundamental human interface, which is a blank page, and made it infinitely powerful. And that is genuinely rare in an industry that usually equates sophistication with complication and success.
And before we let you go here, Zat, what should people be paying more attention to if they want to understand where the future of work software is headed?
I would say to pay attention to the trend of consolidation. So we're moving away from best-of-breed tools towards platforms that can be many things to many people. But more importantly, watch how AI changes the relationship between users and software. We're entering an era where you won't need to learn how software works. You just describe what you want and it will build itself. So Notion is early to that future, but I suppose they won't be alone for long. But I think this is what the bigger trend is about, right? We're moving towards software that adapts to human thinking rather than forcing humans to adapt to software logic. Andrew mentioned that Notion users either love it absolutely or don't get it at all. It's pretty binary. But the path from not getting it to loving it usually comes through seeing someone else use it creatively. So that suggests, right, that we're entering an era where software adoption happens through inspiration and imitation and not training and compliance. And that, for me, is the fundamentally different model from the enterprise software adoption that we've known for decades.
A great conversation with you, as always. Thank you so much, Zat, for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was Zat, Editor-in-Chief of The Peak Singapore. This has been The Right Business with me, Hongbin Jeong.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.